So, hey, everybody. Terry Kerr, the executive coach and empowerment strategist from the Unstuck Coaching. Welcome to my podcast and video interview series. This is where I showcase the stories of extraordinary survivors who have made the conscious choice to pivot and thrive. So today I have my friend Cecile Andreas. She's from the interior of British Columbia. We actually met online. We were doing a course together called Playing Big for women who want to speak up, create, and lead, and found we had some commonalities to our stories. And she is a physician and coach and has become a friend over the past couple years. So I want to just say welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Terry. It's very kind of you to have me.
Well, anytime. Yeah, we were just talking about, comfort zones. And it's okay to be out of our comfort zone every now and then.
Yes, which is where I find myself today.
Today, exactly. Okay, well, let's just get started then.
Okay, let's do it.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and, where you grew up, what your background is, where you live now, what you do.
So I'm Cecile, and I am an executive coach from Crux Coaching is my company. And I work with leaders and teams to create the outcomes that they want. So the accent is South African. I was born and raised just outside Cape Town in South Africa. And then I've been a proud Canadian for about 20 years. And now I live in Cranbrook, British Columbia, on top of the Rocky Mountains, which is the view I was looking out to. And so that's sort of the nutshell of my story. And spent some time in Manitoba, have worked all the way up into as far north as Churchill.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's high.
Yeah,
north.
That's my story.
Okay. So thanks. I didn't know most of that. Awesome. So one of the things when I threw this out there to the group looking for people was I was looking for people that had a cancer story. Mm-hmm. So do you want to tell us yours?
Yeah. So, the first thing I'll say is last year was 20 years. So I'm like evidence that this thing is survivable and life goes on, which is a good thing to know at some parts of the journey. Mm-hmm. And I think the second thing that I want to acknowledge is that this is really the first time ever I've publicly talked about it.
Wow.
So, yeah, because coming from healthcare, I usually am pretty private about my own medical story and struggles. And so, yeah. So, it's a long, long time ago in a small village in South Africa, literally. So about 20 years ago, it was a sort of, Saturday afternoon, came back from the beach, decided to have a bath and felt a lump in my breast and went, you're 30 years old. How bad could that be? So didn't think anything about it. And, it's pretty normal in medical culture to sort of self-diagnose and self-treat. So I kind of decided, we're just going to watch it. So I watched it for a few weeks, but it didn't go away. And so I went to chat to a friend of mine who was a surgeon, got an ultrasound. That was fine. Couldn't even find the lump on the ultrasound. So, we had a bit of a conversation and he was like, it's nothing. You're young. It's good. And so life went on. And then a few weeks later, I was pregnant with a second baby. And so I was like, cool, that's the explanation. And so, that was in October, November, January, we moved to Canada. August, my daughter was born. And when I went for my prenatal checkup, this lump had just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'd shown it to all the doctors along the way, and they all went, you're pregnant, no problem. And then when I went to see my GP, my daughter had stopped nursing on that side. And I was like, this is weird. And then I sort of said, look, this thing's still here. It's not getting smaller. It feels awful. And that was when the whole story started, and had a mammogram, had an mammogram ultrasound biopsy, and sure enough, it was malignant. Then had mastectomy shortly thereafter, and then had chemotherapy, and eventually elected not to have radiation. And yeah, and here I am, 20 years later, healthy as a horse.
And never had anything post that?
Well, I've had I've had other things, but I've never had anything that related to this. Yeah, I sort of sat, I had the mastectomy in when was it, 1999, and then I only had reconstruction in 2012. So I sat on that one for quite a long time, kind of wanted to think it through.
Mm-hmm.
Several times, apparently.
Apparently it took you a while to think that one through. Okay, well, so at what point, so one of the things, I sent you a list of questions, and, I told you that I would riff a little bit, because not everybody's story is the same as mine. And, when I wrote my questions, I wrote them from my point of view, and not always the case. So, you were a physician before you were diagnosed, and you continued to be a physician after you were diagnosed. At some point, you decided to also become a coach. Did you think that either of those, was there any particular, like, was it a slow growing choice to do that? Or did it have anything to do with your original story?
So that was actually one of the things that I really thought through when I got your email initially. And so what happened was, as soon as I had for more than a cold at any point in my life until that moment. And so I had a very specific understanding of how healthcare works, what it means, what it means to be ill, what all of that. I had this very specific understanding from a very healthy person's perspective. And so when I was diagnosed, it completely disrupted my understanding of the world. And I knew right away that whatever was happening to me medically was not meeting my needs emotionally. So I knew at that point that the system as it was designed and the system that I needed didn't align. And so I initially thought that, my role would just be in advocacy, that I would just advocate for the system to change. And then, I would see patients and I would try to make a system that would meet their needs differently. But as a single player in the system, it's hard to move a system. And especially because I've always lived in rural places my whole life. You don't have a lot of influence about how things happen outside of our little town. And so slowly over the years, I just got more and more disillusioned. And then at one point, I sort of had this, and it all happened between 2012 and 2013. I had this sort of moment where I just could not stay in the system and work in a system that I completely lost belief in, and be in any kind of integrity with myself. And so I actually hired a coach at that point and sort of said, what do I do with this? And that's when I thought, okay, so maybe if I listen differently to my patients, then I would change the experience somehow. So I thought, okay, coaching, that has to be bad. So school wanting to just get coaching skills to use in practice, but like 5 minutes in, I was like sold, because I found, I'd finally found a discipline where I never have to have the answer.
Yeah,
I can live in the question for as long as we need to be in the question. And it was like, once I realized that, it was such a freeing moment, so it was very quick from finding the thing that really set me free to listen and just be with people, to deciding that was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, without any interruption or distraction.
yeah. So how are you incorporating your coaching into your physician practice?
Um, so I actually do it in a few ways. I'd like to believe that I've learned to listen way better than I used to, and I think because of that, I tend to, um, yeah, so it's fundamentally changed just how any interaction goes. You know, if you walk into the doctor's office and it's no longer about the transaction and it's about who you are and what you need and what you want and how we can agree on how that, what's possible. And it's a totally different experience for both of us. Um, and I gave up my longitudinal attached full service family practice in 2015, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
So now I just locum, so I don't have that longitudinal relationship, which I miss, but I get that in coaching anyway. But I also work in eating disorders, so I work with youth with that's where coaching comes into its own. And I really I I enjoy patients who are going through hard things. I enjoy the privilege of just being on the journey with people. The one thing that I don't think I appreciated enough for a long time is just what a privilege it is to be, in these incredibly vulnerable moments with people.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
it's beautiful. Like for me, I think about when I went through my cancer treatment, that was really the first time I ever had any engagement with the healthcare system at all, other than having,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
I've never really been sick. I'd never been in the hospital before, other than having babies. And I just, I think about how I had some really great self-aware oncologists. They
Mhm.
were they were lovely, and they really understood the psychology of a cancer diagnosis and
Mhm.
treated me as a whole person and not just my tumor
Mhm.
and my treatment. So that was I count myself as very lucky. I've heard a lot of stories that were not that way.
Mhm.
A lot of my friends that have been through treatment, they, same cancer agency, same office, totally different experience. And, um, I'm so thankful for
And a
radiation.
radiation oncologist. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But she's actually been through like tons of personal development stuff and coaching stuff as well as part of becoming a great doctor.
Mhm.
And so, when I look at that, I just, people that have the opportunity to have those two things together are so blessed, but it goes both ways,
Mhm.
right? Like you said, working with people that are going through hard things and helping them to realize that, hey, you're going through a hard thing,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and look at that. You've done a hard thing. You can do this too. Right.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
that's what, that's what I love about coaching is to be able to hold up the mirror and say, look how capable you are,
Mhm.
look at what you can do. And I see what you can do. And, I know that you're not seeing that right now.
As well, I think, when I think about a cancer journey, there's so much on the journey where it's this sort of warlike conversation about overcoming and fighting
Yes.
and the moment you can take a coach approach in that journey, it becomes about what's possible, and it moves it away from this battle to the death to more of a story of how you'll survive and live and thrive. And I think that's such a powerful transition.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about who I am now versus before I was diagnosed. And, I wasn't a very great friend, and I certainly wasn't a great patient.
Mhm.
Well, actually, I was probably a better patient than I was a friend during that time. I railed again, but I really railed. I wasn't the, pink sister. I really struggled with that, and I really did not enjoy the battle stuff, like the
Mhm.
warrior piece. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm a warrior in and of myself. It doesn't have to be against cancer. You know, I kind of felt like, you know, this is an adversary that, you know, I just don't want to have anything to do with it, really. Let's get rid of it and see you later. And, you know, but have you read The Tale of the Mountain Lion on my website? It was a great analogy that I found when I was sick about how one day you just open up the fridge and out comes a mountain lion. And it's like, what the hell? But you don't have time to really think about it. So you just have to start running. And then, you know, this whole tale of the mountain lion and chasing you and you know, you're looking, and some people have like saber-toothed mountain lions, and some people have like a wimpy little mountain lion with 3 legs. And you're like, why couldn't I have that mountain lion? And, you know, the only thing that kills the mountain lion is the bear, but you have to climb the mountain and the bear has to go through you first. And it's a really great analogy. And at the end of it, it's like, I didn't even want to fight this mountain lion to begin with, but where am I? So when I look at my pivot program that I do, it's an orienteering exercise, starting at the top of that mountain and going, okay, how am I going to find my way back and find my way to where it is that I really want for my life, as opposed to, well, maybe what I was doing before wasn't necessarily what I was wanting to do anyway. So,
I think that's the big thing that I noticed as well, is that there is so much value in understanding our own mortality, because I think up until that point I didn't understand. I mean, like everybody knows die, you know, eventually, but it always seems like this. It doesn't seem imminent ever until you get sick enough to feel like it might happen. And I think I was actually just talking about it last week with somebody who's just recently on the other side of that journey, and just saying, you know, it's very hard to go back to who you were before it all happened. And yet everybody who hasn't walked this path expects that, oh, it's over now, you're going to be who you were before. But when, like, you know, I was thinking about it the other day, and there are members of my family who died within 10 years of the age I am today. So, you know, I need to live today like I am on, like,
yeah. Well, we're only given so many trips around the sun, right?
Yeah. But it's sometimes, unless there's this moment where you kind of have, you know, the universe go, yeah, actually,
yeah.
Most of us don't believe it.
No, we don't. And we don't treat each other that way either.
No.
Like, and that's what I think is what infuriates me the most is, you know, like, I mean, you see all the, you know, stuff that people post online, and you're like, where do you get off being that way? Or, you know, and even just taking for granted the people that you love in your life. You know, one of my biggest things in life is like, why would I waste the days that I have here? Why? I mean, I could be making change. I could be very least enjoying myself.
Yeah, totally.
Right? I don't need to be, you know, changing the world every day.
Totally.
But it'd be nice if I at least had a good time when I was here. So tell me a little bit about some of the, tell me a bit about Crux.
The crux of the matter.
Okay. So tell me about your business.
I actually did the same coaching program as you did as well, just a few years before. So I graduated in 2014 and started Crux as part of that journey. And, you know, as one does, as I do, decided I didn't want to coach in healthcare because I wanted to get away from healthcare. Crazy. But anyway, so I started the first few years just trying to not coach anybody who wasn't in healthcare. And then had an epiphany one day that I could actually contribute more in healthcare, the industry that I know. So anyway, half in healthcare, half outside of healthcare. I do team coach as well. So I work with teams to figure out how they're going to work together to achieve what they need to achieve. And then the funnest part of the journey is that I teach at Royal Roads in the coaching program as well. So I mentor for the graduate certificate, and I teach group and team coaching. And so, it's such a fun job. And then I do, I'm a total training junkie. So I facilitate Brene Brown's work. So I'm a Dare to Lead facilitator, and I do a lot of work with the Enneagram because it's just such a crazy cool tool. And so I do a lot of facilitation and workshops and all that stuff as well. So the excitement that can come from being open to whatever is coming.
Yeah, it's amazing when you start saying yes to the universe.
I know.
Bring it.
I know. And then you got to go like, hang on, universe. I don't have time for this.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear that you are working at Royal Roads, because at one point we were talking about whether you were applying for that.
Yeah.
Was
yeah.
that the one that
I
you
did.
were
So,
applying for? Was that
so I think it was, it was that was, it was the CEC one that so I'm now on the mentor coaching team.
great?
I know, I get to
alumni
listen to
coach
people.
with them. I'm one of the alumni coaches.
It's so good.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I get these, and I have actually 3 people from this cohort that have reached out to me.
Nice.
And I go back to the campus, and I help out with the capstone, and I help out with their, when they're onboarding.
Oh, nice.
I go every time, and it is mind blowing every time, every single time. It's just so great to be around people that want to be in this work and that want to be making a difference in the world. From the point where they're like just getting started and going like, wow, the world is so shiny. And then from when they slide into the home base at the end, and they're like, oh my gosh, the world is wide open for me, and so much different than when they started 9 months before. So it's a great program. I've done a couple different things. I'm interested in the Enneagram thing, actually. I'd like to talk about with you after, but
okay. Yeah, totally.
I'd love to get certified in that, and I don't really know how. So
I can
help me out.
We need to talk. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about did you have a moment in your career, in your life, where you felt the pivot happened, like there was a pivot or a shift?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in 2014, I was going through some stuff, and then 2015. So I started seeing a therapist partway through 2014, and I remember it was a Monday, and I remember it's like a PTSD moment, like those flashback moments where you like it's not like you remember it, it's just happening again. And I remember just having this like very clear insight that I was kind of done with life as I'd lived it. And it had taken me, and I will say it had taken me 14 years to sort of recover, because I was, I recovered until the point. And I remember that day where it was so clear that I was done with how I'd lived life, and that I was going to make big changes. And within 3 months, I had, basically figured out how to give up my practice and do something entirely different. And
any regrets?
No. Actually, the biggest regrets that I didn't do it 10 years sooner. Like, I think if I could live the same life again, I would definitely, I think I would have done a few things different. I would have accessed therapy from the day I was diagnosed until I had worked out all the things I needed to work out and learn. And I think I would have done it quicker. And I have a lot of compassion for myself about why that didn't happen, but that would have been the first thing. And the second thing is, I wish I had discovered coaching then, because it's been such a life-changing experience just to learn the trade and to be in those conversations. So
I remember very clearly. I have a few pivot moments, but that one that I was like, I want to be a coach was a moment. I was at a hockey tournament. My husband was coaching. My son had lost his wallet on the ferry and had to take a ferry. He left it in the arcade, and I he's 18 years old or whatever. I couldn't believe that he was in the arcade was the first thing. But, he had left it in the arcade. He got to the hotel and we had this conversation, and I was like, I just approached it differently. Mm-hmm. And I was like, holy crap, I have come so far in my own personal journey with my kids. And I had been doing some work with with Be More You, with the More course, and doing the big course and all these different things, and really was kind of practicing the whole creating the experience that I wanted in the moment. And I remember sitting back and going, okay, so I could lose my shit on this kid.
Option A.
And really, that's my go-to, right? That would have been my go-to. But he actually got on the phone. He called BC Ferries. He called, and he ended up there was a lady that found it. It ended up being, it all worked out, and they had turned it in, and he did all the legwork without any prompting from me. And so it wasn't until that had happened that he even told us that he'd lost his wallet, till he had already found it. And I had this, okay, well, I could backtrack and give him shit for the whole thing that he's already fixed. Or I could be like, wow, I'm really proud of how you handled that. And what are we going to, and it was just something so small, but I woke up in the middle of the night, and I had this realization that I had shifted, that I had stopped being reactionary and started being intentional with my life in a positive way. And that all of the courses and the different books that I'd been reading, that was actually happening. And it was actually in just a minute little thing like that I went, holy crap. And then I was like, and I know that I can do this. That was my, oh my gosh, I know that I can do this, that I'm on the right path. That was a pivotal moment for me. And that was when I decided to quit my job. Mm-hmm. So that was before I went to Royal Roads. And that weekend I got my application in. The deadline was on the Monday. It was that weekend that I decided. That was on the Thursday night. Yeah. We're on our way to the tournament.
And I think you sent me a text and asked me about it. Yeah. And I said, go for it.
Yeah, that was that weekend. It was Thanksgiving of 2018.
It's hard. Time flies when you're having fun.
2018, I think, now that I think about it. Okay, so now we're completely off track.
Totally.
So how do you balance, and I don't know actually after 20 years if you still have a fear of recurrence, but do you have a fear of recurrence still?
I don't have a fear of recurrence as much as sort of a fear of where the other shoe is going to come from when it drops.
Yeah.
So I kind of will have something happen, and then suddenly I'm catastrophically sick again, in my head. Mm-hmm. And I know it's not logical, but, we're not talking about logic here. We're talking about how it actually is for people. So I think I'm just much more ready to believe that I could have something life-limiting happen in the future. But I don't think, breast cancer is not going to kill me. But who knows? Something else might.
Because you don't.
Yeah.
It could be the coronavirus today.
Yeah, it's not going to be that.
I know, but it could be the lack of toilet paper, because you can't find toilet paper here where I am.
That is a catastrophic event right there.
I know.
How are those related? Okay, no, let's not have that conversation.
I really don't understand.
Yeah.
They're not even related. So if you could go back in time,
toilet paper,
what would be a nugget of information that you wish you knew?
That nobody knows for sure. I think, I remember just desperately wanting somebody to have the right answer, that if we just did that thing, I would survive. And I lived in constant resentment and frustration because I was looking so hard for somebody else to have the answer. And, what I know today is that really the only person who could have reassured me that it was going to be okay was me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, if I had been more ready to just accept that whatever was going to happen next was going to happen without the other, I would have had a better decade.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we can look backwards to see how we could change things if we were to do it over again. But even when and if the next thing comes, we'll probably have to learn that in hindsight too.
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
know, and I think, you know, the other thing that I think I would say as well is that, and this might be more of a reflection of the culture that I've worked in my whole life, but there is, I at some point in that journey connected being ill with being broken, and it took me a long time to disconnect those two. And so, you know, that's the other thing is, you know, I think it's important for people to know too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I had a moment where I felt like, even just in my coaching business, when I was thinking about going into helping cancer survivors, and I was working with a coach at the time, and I said, I know I could niche down, but I just don't want to live in cancer land anymore. And he asked me a question. He's like, Terry, do you feel like talking about cancer is going to get you sick again? And I was like, oh my gosh, like how stupid is that thought? Like, it's not contagious. I'm not hanging out with people that are, going to get me sick again. Like, I had this whole context around it. And same with when I decided to go back to work after being sick, and I was railing against going back because it was like going backwards. And I felt like that's where I got sick. I don't want to go back to the way it was. And, these shifts, it's these conscious shifts of, I realized I have more to offer people that are currently in that state than I do by avoiding them altogether. Right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So when you think about, like, if you were talking to another cancer survivor that is feeling stuck and looking for something different, what would you suggest? What would you tell them?
Well, the first thing I thought it was a great question. And the first thing I wanted to say was, remember that to turn 180 degrees, you have to turn 1 degree at a time.
So good.
You don't have to make the full pivot on day, let it happen, it'll happen. So that would be the first thing that I would say. And the second thing is to trust the timing of the universe. I know that sounds cliche, and I swear to God, if somebody had told me that in 1999, it would not have gone well. I will own that. But I know today that I had that experience for a reason, that I needed to learn things about myself I could not have learned any other way. And I would not be the woman I am today if it wasn't for that experience. So, I trust that that was exactly what I needed. And it sucked, and it was absolutely miserable. And if I could have learned it another way, it would have been really lovely. But apparently I wasn't paying attention.
I don't think we learn without having those experiences. I don't think it's possible to learn that without having that.
I can't recall a good life lesson I've learned. Sorry, we had a sync up problem there, but I can't recall a lesson that I've learned from a good experience. I require pain to learn.
You're not alone. You're not alone. Okay, so I think, is there anything further that you would want to tell us or talk to us about?
Let me see. I have notes, because I'm so well prepared.
You told me you wrote a book. Did you write a book?
No.
Oh.
No, that's not me.
Oh.
No.
I thought that maybe you were recommending somebody that I talked to about writing my book.
Yes. So So one of my teammates from Royal Roads actually has written 2 novels since.
Okay, that's what that's from.
From Royal Roads, and so that was the person I was going to connect you with. And she's got her own very interesting story, but it's hers to tell. Yeah, I think the other thing that I wrote about pivoting is remember that movement is movement, and sometimes you have to go back to go forward.
Yeah. It's funny. I was speaking with a client recently who's just feeling really stuck. And I'm like, what do you think is holding you there? She goes, oh, I'm just lazy. And I'm like, well, okay, how's that working for you? Right. And she's not willing to move on any way at all, either anyway. And, okay, well, that's fine. Then are you comfortable with that? Because that's where you're going to be staying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And movement. Yeah. Movement is movement in any direction.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
In some parts of the journey, it's hard to believe that it's worth doing anything, because the fear of, is it going to recur? Am I actually going to live? If I start something now, am I going to be able to see it through? All that stuff those are normal thoughts that everybody has when they're confronted with the diagnosis. And so being stuck is sometimes exactly what you need to do in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The question really is, how much compassion are you going to give yourself for that stuckness? Are you going to see it as laziness, or are you willing to see it as something that's necessary for your growth right now?
Yeah.
A seed lies in the soil until it germinates. It doesn't run through the soil to germinate.
No. And if you cut open the wings of a butterfly, it's just going to kill it. It needs the struggle to make the wings grow.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome. Well, this has been great. And I'm very thankful that you joined me and that you stepped out of your comfort zone to come and speak with me. So tell me what your website is.
My website is cruxcoaching.ca. So CRUX coaching.ca.
Okay.
And if people want to contact me, Cecile at cruxcoaching.ca.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Terry.